Face Value by Karen Joy Fowler. It was almost like being alone. Taki, who had been alone one way or another most of his life, recognized this and thought he could deal with it. What choice did he have? It was only that he had allowed himself to hope for something different. A second star, small and dim, joined the sun in the sky, making its appearance over the rope bridge which spanned the empty river. Taki crossed the bridge in a hurry to get inside before the hottest part of the day began. Something flashed briefly in the dust at his feet. He stooped to pick it up. It was one of Hesper's poems, half finished, left out all night. Taki had stopped reading Hesper's poetry. It reflected nothing, not a whisper of her life here with him, but was filled with longing for things and people behind her. Taki pocketed the poem on his way to the house, stood outside the door, removed what dust he could with a stiff brush which hung at the entrance. He keyed his admittance. The door made a slight sucking sound as it resealed behind him. Hesper had set out an iced glass of aid for him. Taki drank it in a gulp, superimposing his own dusty fingerprints over hers, sketched lightly in the condensation on the glass. The drink was heavily sugared, only made him thirstier. A cloth curtain separated one room from another, a blue sheet. Hesper's innovation, since the dwelling was designed as a single multifunctional space. Through the curtain, Taki heard a voice, knew Hesper was listening again to her mother's letter. Earth weather, the romance of her younger cousins. The letter had arrived weeks ago, but Taki was careful not to remind Hesper how old its news really was. If she chose to imagine the lives of a family moving along the same timeline as her own, this must be a fantasy she needed. She knew the truth. The time it had taken her to travel here with Taki, her mother had grown old and died. Her cousins had settled into marriages happy or unhappy, or had faced life alone. The letters, which continued to arrive with some regularity, were an illusion. A lifetime later, Hesper would answer them. Taki ducked through the curtain to join her. Hot, he told her as if this were news. She lay on her mat, stomach down, legs bent at the knees, feet crossed in the air. Her hair, the color of dried grasses, hung over her face. Taki stared for a moment at the back of her head. Here, he said. He pulled her poem from his pocket and laid it by her hand. I found this out front. Hesper switched off the letter and rolled onto her back away from the poem. She was careful not to look at Taki. Her cheeks were stained with irregular red patches, so that Taki knew she'd been crying again. The observation caused him a familiar mixture of sympathy and impatience. His feelings for Hesper always came in these uncomfortable combinations. It tired him. Out front, Hesper repeated, and her voice held a practiced tone of uninterested nastiness. And how did you determine that one part of the featureless landscape was the front? Because of the door. We have only the one door, so it's the front door. No, said Hesper. If we had two doors, then one might arguably be the front door and the other the back door. With only one, it's just the door. Her gaze went straight upward. You use words so carelessly. Words from another world. They mean nothing here. Her eyelids fluttered briefly, the lashes darkened with tears. It's not just an annoyance to me, you know, she said. Can't help but damage your work. My work is the study of the mean, Taki answered, not the creation of a new language. Hesper's eyes closed. I really don't see the difference, she told him. She lay a moment longer without moving, then opened her eyes and looked at Taki directly. I don't want to have this conversation. I don't know why I started it. Let's rewind, run it again. I'll be the wife this time. You come in and say, Honey, I'm home. And I'll ask you how your morning was. Taki began to suggest that this was a scene from another world and would mean nothing here. He had not yet framed the sentence when he heard the door seal released and saw Hesper's face go hard and white. She reached for her poem and slid it under the scarf at her wrist. Before she could get to her feet, the first of the mean had joined them in the bedroom. Taki ducked through the curtain to fasten the door before the temperature inside the house rose. The outer room was filled with dust, and the hands which reached out to him as he went past left dusty streaks on his clothes and his skin. He counted 8 of the mean, fluttering about him like large moths the size of human children, with furry vestigial wings, hourglass abdomens, stick-like limbs. They danced about him in the open space, looked through the cupboards, pulled the tapes from his desk. When they had their backs to him, he could see the symmetrical arrangement of dark spots which marked their wings in a pattern resembling a human face. A very sad face, very distinct. Masculine, Taki had always thought, but Hesper disagreed. The party which made initial contact under the leadership of Hans Mean so many years ago had wisely found the faces too whimsical for mention in their report. Instead, they included pictures and allowed them to speak for themselves. Perhaps the original explorers had been asking the same question Hesper posed the first time Taki showed her the pictures. Was the face really there? Or was this only evidence of the ability of humans to see their own faces in everything? Hesper had a poem entitled The Kitchen God, which recounted the true story of a woman about a century ago who had found the image of Christ in the burn marks on a tortilla. Do they see it too? She'd asked Taki, but there was as yet no way to ask this of the mean, no way to know if they had reacted with shock and recognition to the faces of the first humans they had seen. Those studies of the mean eye suggested a finer depth of perception which might significantly distort the flat image. Taki thought that Hesper's own face had changed since the day, only 6 months ago, calculated as travel time, when she'd said she would come here with him. He thought it was because she loved him. They'd sorted through all the information which had been collected to date on the mean. Her face had been all sympathy then. What would it be like, she asked him, to be able to fly and then to lose the ability, to outgrow it? What would a loss like that do to the racial consciousness of a species? It happened so long ago, I doubt it's even noticed as a loss, Taki had answered. Legends, myths, not really believed, perhaps. Probably not even that. In the racial memory, not even a whisper. Hesper had ignored him. What a shame they don't write poetry, she had said. She was finding them less romantic now. She joined Taki in the outer room, her face stoic. The mean surrounded her, ran their string-fingered hands all over her body, inside her clothing. One mean attempted to insert a finger into her mouth. Hesper tightened her lips together resolutely, dust on her chin. Her eyes were fastened on Taki, accusingly, beseechingly. Taki was no good at reading people's eyes. He looked away. Eventually the mean grew bored. They left in groups, she lingering behind to poke among the boxes in the bedroom, and following the others until Hesper and Taki were left alone. Hesper went to wash herself as thoroughly as their limited water supply allowed. Taki swept up the loose dust. Before he finished, Hesper returned, showing him her empty jewelry box without a word. The jewelry had all belonged to her mother. I'll get them when it cools, Taki told her. Thank you. It was always Hesper's things that the mean took. The more they disgusted her, pawing over her, rummaging through her things, no way to key the door against clever mean fingers, even if Taki had agreed to lock them out, which he had not. The more fascinating they seemed to find her. They touched her twice as often as they touched Taki, and much more insistently. They took her jewelry, her poems, her letters, all the things she treasured most. And Taki believed, although it was far too early in his studies really to speculate with any assurance, the mean read something off the objects. The initial explorers had concluded that mean communication was entirely telepathic. If this was accurate, and Taki's speculation was not such a leap. Certainly the mean didn't value the objects for themselves. Taki always found them discarded in the dust on the side of the rope bridge. The fact that everything would be easily recovered did nothing to soften Hesper's sense of invasion. She mixed herself a drink, stirring it with a metal straw which poked through the dust-proof lid. You shouldn't allow it, she said at last, and Taki knew from the time that had elapsed that she had tried not to begin this familiar conversation. He appreciated her effort as much as he was annoyed by her failure. It's part of my job, he reminded her. We have to be accessible to them. I study them. They study us. There's no way to differentiate the two activities, and certainly no way to establish communication except simultaneously. You're letting them study us. You're giving them a false picture. You're allowing them to believe that humans intrude on each other in this way. Does it occur to you that they may be involved in similar charades? If so, what can either of us learn? Taki took a deep breath. The need for privacy may not be as intrinsically human as you imagine. I could point to many societies which afforded very little of this. As for any deliberate misrepresentations on their part, isn't that the whole rationale for not sending a study team? Wouldn't I be farther along if I were working with environmentalists, physiologists, linguists? But the risk of contamination increases exponentially with each additional human. It would be too much of a presence. Of course, I would be very careful. I'm far from the stage in my study where I can begin to draw conclusions when I visit them, reinforcing the notion that such visits are ordinary human behavior. Hesper was looking at Taki with great coolness. When I visit them, I am much more circumspect. Taki finished. I conduct my study as unobtrusively as possible. And what do you imagine you're studying? Hesper asked. She closed her lips tightly over the straw and drank. Taki regarded her steadily and with exasperation. Is this a trick question? He asked. I imagine I'm studying the mean. What do you imagine I'm studying? What humans always study, said Hesper. Humans. You never saw one of the mean alone, not ever. One never wandered off to watch the sun set or take its food to a solitary hole to eat without sharing. They did everything in groups. Although Taki had been observing them for weeks now, and was able to identify individuals and had compiled charts of the groupings he had seen, trying to isolate families or friendships or work castes, still the results were inconclusive. His attempts at communication were similarly discouraging. He tried verbalizations, but had not expected a response to them, had no idea how they processed audio information, although they could hear. He tried clapping and gestures, simple hand signals for the names of common objects. He had no sense that these efforts were noticed. He was so unfocused when he dealt with them, fluttering here, fluttering there. Taki's ESP quotient had never been measurable. He tried that route, too. He tried to send a simple command. He would trap a mean hand and hold it against his own cheek, trying to form in his mind the picture which corresponded to the action. When he released the hand, sticky mean fingers might linger for a moment, or they might slip away immediately, tangle in his hair instead, or tap his teeth. Mean teeth were tiny and pointed like wires. Taki saw them only when the mean ate. At other times they were hidden inside the folds of skin, which almost hid their eyes as well. Taki speculated that the skin flap protected their mouths and eyes from the dust. Taki found mean faces less expressive than their backs. Head on, they appeared petaled and blind as flowers. When he wanted to differentiate one mean from another, Taki looked at their wings. Hesper had warned him there would be no art, but he asked her how she could be so sure. Because their communication system is perfect, she said. Out of one brain and into the next with no loss of meaning, no need for abstraction. Art arises from the inability to communicate. Art is the imperfect symbol, isn't it? But Taki, watching the mean carry water up from their underground deposits, asked himself where the line between tools and art objects should be drawn. For no functional reason that he could see, the water containers curved in the center like the shapes of the mean's own abdomens. Taki followed the mean below ground, down some shallow, rough-cut stairs into the darkness. The mean themselves were slightly luminescent when there was no other light. At times and seasons, some were spectacularly so, and Taki's best guess was that this was sexual. Even with the dimmer members, Taki could see well enough. He moved through a long tunnel with a low ceiling which made him stoop. He could hear water at the other end of it, not the water itself, but a special quality to the silence which told him water was near. The lake was clearly artificial, collected during the rainy season, which no human had seen yet. The tunnel narrowed sharply. Talkie could have gone forward, but felt suddenly claustrophobic and backed out instead. What did the Mean think, he wondered, of the fact that he came here without Hesper? Did they notice this at all? Did it teach them anything about humans that they were capable of understanding? Their lives together are perfect, Hesper said, except for those useless wings. If they're ever able to talk with us at all, it will be because of those wings. Of course, Hesper was a poet. The world was all language as far as she was concerned. When Talkie first met Hesper at a party given by a colleague of his, he'd asked her what she did. I name things, she'd said. I try to find the right names for things. In retrospect, Talkie thought it was bullshit. Couldn't remember why he'd been so impressed with it at the time. Deliberate miscommunication, when a simple answer, I write poetry, would have been so clear and easy to understand. He felt the same way about her poetry itself, needlessly obscure, slightly evocative, but it left the reader feeling that he had fallen short somehow. It had been a test and he had flunked it. It was unkind poetry. Talkie had worked so hard to read it then. Am I right? He would ask her anxiously when he finished. Is that what you're saying? She would answer that the poem spoke for itself. Once it's on the page, I've lost control over it, and the reader determines what it says or how it works. Hesper's eyes were gray, the irises so large and intense within their dark circles that they made Talkie dizzy. So you're always right, by definition, even if it's not remotely close to what I intended. What Talkie really wanted was to find himself in Hesper's poems. He would read them anxiously for some symbol which could be construed as him, some clue as to his impact on her life. But he was never there. It was against policy to send anyone into the field alone. There were pros and cons, of course, but ultimately the isolation of a single professional was seen as too cruel. For shorter projects, there were advantages in sending a threesome, but during a longer study, the group dynamics in a trio often became difficult. Two were considered ideal. Talkie knew that Raji and Hayan had applied for this post, a husband and wife team in which both members were trained for this type of study. He never stopped being surprised as the post had been offered to him instead. Could not even have been considered if Hesper had not convinced the members of the committee of her willingness to accompany him. But she must have done much more. She must have impressed someone very much for them to decide that one trained xenologist and one poet might be more valuable than two trained xenologists. The committee had made some noises about contamination occurring between the two trained professionals, but Talkie found this argument specious. What did you say to them? He asked her after her interview, and she shrugged. You know, she said, words. Talkie had hidden things from the committee during his own interview. Things about Hesper, her moods, her deep attachment to her mother, her unreliable attachment to him. He must have known it would never work out, but he walked about in those days with the stunned expression of a man who's been given everything. Could he be blamed for accepting it? Could he be blamed for believing in Hesper's unexpected willingness to accompany him? Made a sort of equation for Talkie. If Hesper was willing to give up everything and come with Talkie, then Hesper loved Talkie. An ordinary marriage commitment was reviewable every 5 years. This was something much greater. No other explanation made any sense. The equation still held a sort of inevitability for Talkie. Then Hesper loved Talkie if Hesper were willing to come with him. So somehow, sometime, Talkie had done something which lost him Hesper's love. If he could figure out what, perhaps he could make her love him again. Do you love me? He'd asked Hesper only once. He had too much pride for these thinly disguised pleadings. Love is such a difficult word, she had answered, but her voice had been filled with a rare softness and had not hurt Talkie as much as it might. The day star was appearing again when Talkie returned home. Hesper had made a meal which suggested she was coping well today. It included a sort of a pudding made of a local fruit they found themselves able to tolerate. Hesper called the pudding box tea. It was apparently a private joke. Talkie was grateful for the food and the joke, even if he didn't understand it. He tried to keep the conversation lighthearted, talking to Hesper about the mean water jars. Talkie's position was that when the form of a practical object was less utilitarian than it might be, then it was art. Hesper laughed. She ran through a list of human artifacts and made him classify them. A paperclip, she said. The shape hasn't changed in centuries, he told her. Not art. A safety pin. Talkie hesitated. How essential was the coil at the bottom of the pin? Very. Not art, he decided. A hairbrush. Boar bristle. Wood handle. Art. Definitely. She smiled at him. You're confusing ornamentation with art. Why not? It's as good a definition as any, she told him. Eat your box tea. They spent the whole afternoon alone, uninterrupted. Talkie transcribed this morning's notes into his files, reviewed his tapes. Hesper recorded a letter whose recipient would never hear it, and sang softly to herself. That night he reached for her, his hand along the curve of her waist. She stiffened slightly, but responded by putting her hand on his face. He kissed her, and her mouth did not move. His movements became less gentle. Might have been passion, might have been anger. She told him to stop, but he didn't, couldn't, wouldn't. Stop, she said again, and he heard she was crying. They're here. Please stop. They're watching us. Studying us, Talkie said. Let them. But he rolled away and released her. They were alone in the room. He would have seen the mean easily in the dark. Hesper, he said, there's no one here. She lay rigid on her side of their bed. He saw the stitching of her backbone disappearing into her neck, had a sudden feeling that he could see everything about her, how she was made, how she was held together. Made him no less angry. I'm sorry, Hester told him, but he didn't believe her. Even so, he was asleep before she was. He made his own breakfast the next morning without leaving anything out for her. It was gone before she had gotten out of bed. The mean were gathering food, dried husks thick enough to protect the liquid fruit during the two-star dry season. They punctured the husks with their needle-thin teeth. Several crowded about him, greeting him with their fingers, checking his pockets, removing his recorder and passing it about until one of them dropped it in the dust. When they returned to work, Talkie retrieved it, wiping it as clean as he could. He sat down to watch them, logged everything he observed. He noted in particular how often they touched each other, wondered what each touch meant. Affection, communication, some sort of chain of command. Later he went underground again, choosing another tunnel, looking for one which wouldn't narrow so as to exclude him, but finding himself beside the same lake, the same narrow access ahead. He went deeper this time, till it gradually became too close for his shoulders. Before him he could see a luminescence. He smelled the dusty odor of the mean, could just make out a sound, too, a sort of movement, a grass rubbing together sound. He stooped and strained his eyes to see something in the faint light. It was like looking into the wrong end of a pair of binoculars. The tunnel narrowed and narrowed. Beyond it must be the mean homes, and he could never get into them. He contrasted this with the easy access they had to his home. At the end of his vision, he thought he could just see something move, but he wasn't sure. A light touch on the back of his neck, another behind his knees, startled him. He twisted around to see a group of the mean crowded into the tunnel behind him. It gave him a feeling of being trapped. He had to force himself to be very gentle as he pushed his way back, let the mean go through. The dark pattern of their wings stood in high relief against the luminescent bodies. Human faces grew smaller and smaller till they disappeared. Leave me alone, Hesper told him. It took Talkie completely by surprise. He had done nothing but enter the bedroom, not even spoken yet. Just leave me alone. Talkie saw no signs that Hesper had ever gotten up. She lay against the pillow. Her cheek was still creased from the wrinkles in the sheets. She had not been crying. was something worse in her face, something which alarmed Talkie. "Hesper," he asked. "Hesper, did you eat anything? Let me get you something to eat." It took Hesper a moment to answer. When she did, she looked ordinary again. "Thank you," she said. "I am hungry." She joined him in the outer room, wrapped in their blanket, her hair tangled around her face. She got a drink for herself, dropping the empty glass once, stooping to retrieve it. Talkie had the strange impression that the glass fell slowly. When they had first arrived, the gravitational pull had been light, just perceptibly lighter than Earth's. Without quite noticing, this had registered on him in a sort of lightheartedness. But Hesper had complained of feelings of dislocation, disconnection. Talkie put together a cold breakfast, which Hesper ate slowly, watching her own hands as if they fascinated her. Talkie looked away. "Fork," she said. He looked back. She was smiling at him. "What?" "Fork." He understood. "Not art." "4 tines?" He didn't answer. "Roses carved on the handle." "Well then, art. Because of the handle, not because of the tines." He was greatly reassured. The mean came while he was telling her about the tunnel. They put their dusty fingers in her food, pulled it apart. Hesper set her fork down and pushed the plate away. When they reached for her, she pushed them away too. They came back. Hesper shoved harder. "Hesper," said Talkie, "I just want to be left alone. They never leave me alone." Hesper stood up, towering above the mean. The blanket fell to the floor. "We flew here," Hesper said to the mean. "Did you see the ship? Didn't you see the pod? Doesn't that interest you? Flying?" She laughed and flapped her arms until they froze horizontally at her side. The mean reached for her again. She brought her arms in to protect her breasts, pushing the mean away repeatedly, harder and harder, till they tired of approaching her and went into the bedroom, reappearing with her poems in their hands. The door sealed behind them. "I'll get them back for you," Talkie promised. But Hesper told him not to bother. "I haven't written in weeks," she said, "in case you haven't noticed. Haven't finished a poem since I came here. I've lost that, along with everything else." She brushed at her hair rather frantically with one hand. "It doesn't matter," she added. "My poems? Not art." "Are you the best person to judge that?" Talkie asked. "Don't patronize me." Hesper returned to the table, looking again at the mean. Reached for her again, and she brought her arms in to protect her breasts, pushing the mean away repeatedly, harder and harder, till they tired of approaching her and went into the bedroom, reappearing with her poems in their hands. The door sealed behind them. "I'll get them back for you," Talkie promised. Hesper told him not to bother. "I haven't written in weeks," she said, "in case you haven't noticed. Haven't finished a poem since I came here. I've lost that, along with everything else." She brushed at her hair rather frantically with one hand. "It doesn't matter," she added. "My poems? Not art." "Are you the best person to judge that?" Talkie asked. "Don't patronize me." Hesper returned to the table, looked again at the plate which held her unfinished breakfast, dusty from handling. "My critical faculties are still intact. It's just the poetry that's gone." She took a dish to clean it, scraped the food away. "I was never any good," she said. "Why do you think I came here? I had no poetry of my own, so I thought I'd write the means. I came to a world without words. I hoped it would be clarifying. I knew there was a risk." Her hands moved very fast. "I want you to know I don't blame you." "Come and sit down a moment, Hesper," Talkie said, but she shook her head. She looked down at her body and moved her hands over it. "They feel sorry for us. Did you know that? They feel sorry about our bodies." "How do you know that?" Talkie asked. "Logic. We have these completely functional bodies. No useless wings. Not art." Hester picked up the blanket and headed for the bedroom. At the cloth curtain she paused a moment. "They love our loneliness, though. They've taken all mine. They'd never leave me alone now." She thrust her right arm suddenly out into the air, made the curtain ripple. "Go away," she said, ducking behind the sheet. Talkie followed her. He was very frightened. "No one is here but us, Hesper," he told her. He tried to put his arms around her, but she pushed him back and began to dress. "Don't touch me all the time," she said. He sank onto the bed and watched her. She sat on the floor to fasten her boots. "Are you going out, Hesper?" he asked, and she laughed. "Hesper is out," she said. "Hesper is out of place, out of time, out of luck, and out of her mind. Hesper has vanished completely. Hesper was broken into and taken." Talkie fastened his hands tightly together. "Please don't do this to me, Hesper," he pleaded. "It's really so unfair. When did I ask so much of you? I took what you offered me. I never took anything else. Please don't do this." Hesper had found the brush and was pulling it roughly through her hair. He rose and went to her, grabbing her by the arms, trying to turn her to face him. "Please, Hesper." She shook loose from him without really appearing to notice his hands, continued to work through the worst of her tangles. When she did turn around, her face was familiar, somehow not Hesper's face. It was a face which startled him. "Hesper is gone," he said. "We have her. You've lost her. We're ready to talk to you, even though you will never, never, never understand." She reached out to touch him, laying her open palm against his cheek and leaving it there.